If you are in perimenopause and feel like your body is fighting you, there's a reason. The most common advice women get: eat less, move more. It's not just outdated, it's actually making things worse. So in this episode, I'm going to explain the number one nutrition mistake women make during this stage, how it's damaging your hormones and metabolism, and what to do instead if you actually want to feel better and see results. So as a woman that went through menopause at 46 years old, but actually did not know she was going through it, I can tell you that there are so many outdated and just inaccurate things that are being spread around menopause and what's causing the issues and what to do about it. But first, we need to get on the same page about talking about menopause, because let me go back to when I was a kid and I first got my period. I was a teenager, and I remember my mom came in and I was like a little scared and stressed out. And I remember she said to me, "Oh, this is something to celebrate. You're a woman. You are going through this whole new stage of your life." And I didn't quite know what she meant by that, but now as an adult, I get it. It really is a special time for a female in her becoming a woman. And yet, when we talk about menopause, when we actually just complain about menopause, now I get it. I get why we complain about it. But when we talk about it, as society thinks about it, and as we define it, it's a diagnosis. It's almost like a disease. And I always get a little bit miffed when I hear about diagnosing menopause, because we don't diagnose a woman when she gets her period. This is a natural phase of life that actually should and could be celebrated. Do you know that in Japan, they don't even have the word for hot flash? It doesn't even exist. Why? Well, because so much of what we're doing right now as a cultural society is actually causing us to have a lot of the issues that we have during menopause, making it very challenging for so many women. So we're really going to unpack the myths that we've been taught, why I didn't even know I went through menopause, and what we need to be doing instead, regardless of what stage you're in. Let's just talk a little bit, though, first about what perimenopause is, because I don't think people realize when they say I'm going through menopause, menopause is literally like a day on a calendar, like the day that you are no longer getting your period for a year. And so we're never really like in menopause. We're typically in perimenopause, which is like before menopause, or we're postmenopausal. And perimenopause, I don't think people realize this, but we can be, like, as someone that went through menopause at 46, I clearly had perimenopausal things going on in my 30s, because we had a plan about 10 years or so before. It's one of the reasons why a woman in her late 30s, and this term kills me when I hear about it, will be considered in geriatric pregnancy if they're pregnant in their late 30s or early 40s. But it is because that menopausal time for women actually starts a good 10 years before. So even if you're not feeling symptoms right now, there are so many things that we can be doing or not doing that are going to help us during this time. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's actually happening, because the advice that we get, or that we tend to go to as women, is around some of the things we did when we were younger, when we were trying to quote unquote lose weight, right? If we felt like we needed to lose weight, be on a diet. Now, all of us, when I ask women, how many years have you been obsessing about your body and food? How many years have you been on a diet per se? An average 50-year-old woman will tell me that she has been dieting, obsessing about food in her body for well over 30 years. The average from our polling is 34 years. And it breaks my heart, because we're chasing and chasing and chasing this elusive number on a scale. But I will also say that when we were younger, the eat less, move more thing, quote unquote, worked. Now, I will always say, what is your definition of working? If it's losing weight at first to then wreak havoc on your body and your hormones, and then to gain it all back when you suddenly stop the said diet, whatever it is, well, then diets worked. But so many of us have this definition of working around weight loss, and it's almost like weight loss by any means possible. And the cycle of yo-yo dieting, I actually just talked about this in my last episode, is what's really caused so much havoc on a woman's body over so many years. Now, because I realize how, and I was so lucky and blessed to have a coach, a nutrition coach that taught me about the concepts that I'm going to teach you here today, that I teach my clients around how to fuel our bodies and why we need to fuel our bodies correctly. I was in my 30s when I learned this, and my clients and I always say, like, I wish women would embrace this in their 30s, because if you're 50 and you have been on a yo-yo roller coaster of dieting and obsessing and restriction, it's causing a lot of the issues that you're feeling around perimenopause. Now, that being said, it's also around a variety of other things that are going on, like environmental and toxins and stress and our lack of movement. But first and foremost, the foundation is, how are we fueling our bodies? And this myth that we need to restrict, this whole take in less calories and you burn thing, which is, by the way, just like an impossible equation, but also perseverates the whole dieting PTSD that we all have. It continues to perseverate the problem that sometimes we don't actually feel until we're in perimenopause. So our body has what I call their check engine lights. And check engine lights are your body's way of communicating you, almost like holding you accountable for things that are going on that we need to address. And by the time we get to perimenopause, we have a lot of these check engine lights. It's like a slow drip in a cup. And by the time you're in perimenopause, it feels like that cup is really full. But your body has likely been talking to you for a very long time up until then. And so when we restrict, when we continue to lose weight, gain weight, yo-yo, when we aren't consistent in what we're doing, when we're not moving our body, we're not strength training, all of these things cause little drips. When we're on what I know most of us are, on a dysregulated blood sugar roller coaster, we are wreaking this havoc for years and years and years. So many people today are insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, diabetic, and it wasn't because of what they've done in the last couple of years. It's because of this roller coaster that they've been on for decades. So we need to understand that, and what we are doing or the symptoms that we're experiencing by the time we're getting to perimenopause have been a compilation of many, many years. And that's why I continue to be so grateful for learning what I learned in my late 30s, so that by the time I was 46 and went through menopause, I actually didn't have those symptoms. And I remember my doctor actually said to me, how is it that you are full blown, like through menopause, and you didn't have any symptoms? I didn't have weight gain. I had some hot flashes here and there, but very, very little. And he said to me, remind me what you teach your clients again. And I'm like, I teach blood sugar stabilization. And he's like, yes, because, it's all about insulin resistance. And while I'll get some hate on this, it says it's not all about insulin resistance, it is foundational. And insulin resistance actually wreaks havoc on almost every single aspect of our body, including our gut, including our hormones, all sorts of things. Like, think about it. Insulin's a hormone. And once one hormone is off, all hormones are off. So we need to be really cognizant of the role that insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation is playing for the long term, especially by the time we get to perimenopause. And he said to me, it's all about insulin resistance, which I understand, or insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance, which I understand the concept of, but I don't understand how to teach people how to mitigate that problem. And I was like, well, that's why we get along so well. And so when we are in this eat less, move more kind of a thing, what we're not realizing is that there's so many problems with it that end up causing the issues that we have when we're in perimenopause. And yet when we were younger, we were like, it worked. But again, what is your definition of working? It worked if you were looking for short-term weight loss. It didn't work if you were looking for long-term longevity, health, menopausal balance, and just true food freedom. Because a lot of what we have learned around eat less, move more has just contributed to our obsessive compulsion about our body and weight and not having a good relationship with our body and food. And because we don't celebrate menopause, but we almost demonize it, we have this, I feel like it's this like sisterhood around menopausal women, but I know that it is something to celebrate. Now that I'm through menopause, it's like my sister-in-law said the other day, I love 50-year-old Carrie because she doesn't care anymore. And it's not like I'm mean or anything. I don't let little things get to me. My sister the other day, we were out on the beach. We were on a little family vacation and I was wearing a swimsuit that had like cat sleeves on it. And she said to me, oh my gosh, that bathing suit is so cute, but aren't you worried about tan lines? And I'm like, I could care less about tan lines. No. And that's when my other sister-in-law said, oh, I love 50-year-old Carrie because she doesn't care. Like, I'm just going to wear what I like and I'm not going to worry about the tan lines and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I feel like some of the celebration is around being at this age. Like, I am not trying to impress anybody. I am trying to live as long as possible and be the healthiest version of myself in every single way possible so that I can serve my purpose, that I can have balance, that I can have joy, that I can have contentment, and really celebrate this half century of my life. My goal is to get to well past 100. That's the number I'm looking for, not a number on a scale. And yet we've been so conditioned for so long to think a certain way and do a certain way that by the time we get to menopause, it's like everything just blows up. The body that we used to know, we don't know anymore because it's not quote unquote working for us anymore. And then our emotions kind of get all out of whack and we don't know how to handle that. But when we can honestly understand how to fuel ourselves correctly, it's amazing how that sets the foundation for everything else. And then I know people will ask me about HRT, like hormone replacement therapy, and I actually am on hormones because I know the power and the benefit of them proactively for women's health, as well as the fact that like the sky is blue. It is absolutely known that our hormone levels will drop as we get older. Our estrogen, our progesterone, our testosterone, all of those will decrease. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us that it happens. It's a math equation. And we know that estrogen, for example, helps us to manage our moods. It regulates our appetite. It controls our body temperature. It helps us build strong bones. It also keeps our vagina happy. And one of the reasons I knew that I actually needed to dig into this a lot more was because I was getting recurring UTIs. That was one of the things I got once I was postmenopausal. And I had a lot of dryness. And I knew that it had to do with my hormones, but it was because my estrogen levels are continuing to decline. Since I've actually been on hormone replacement therapy and I have estrogen now and progesterone, I haven't had any UTIs and everything is working really, really well down there. And so I want us to not be scared of that. I'm not really going to dig that much into it, but it's really important to recognize that it is a math equation. It's going to decrease. When our progesterone decreases, that impacts our bone health. That actually impacts our heart rate variability, our body temperature, inflammation, immunity. And then testosterone, there's a piece of testosterone that every single woman has. It's very different than in men. And a lot of our research around testosterone and hormones, it's been around men. And we are not just small women. But testosterone really does help our energy and vitality, our mental clarity and our mood, our muscle strength, our lean muscle mass, which is so important as we get older for longevity, our libido, our sexual health, our hormonal balance, our bone density. And so those three hormones, now there's many, many more, but just to keep it really basic, are going to decline as we get older. And so it's almost to me like everybody's got to speak to their professional, but I've actually engaged a hormone specialist versus my OB because I realized my OB isn't actually a specialist in hormones like this. There's so many different kinds out there. I actually see Dr. Sarah Daccaret from Inner Balance, which I highly recommend. She might kill me because a whole bunch of people may now come to her, but for information on that, I actually had her on my podcast a few episodes ago. We can link that in the show notes because understanding HRT is really powerful. And again, we as women have been misled by data that is not accurate around HRT. So Super important to understand. But when we recognize that as we get older, we are automatically going to have hormone shifts. We're going to have our metabolic adaptation is absolutely a thing as we go through perimenopause. We need to understand this and not be surprised by it. But it's like we don't communicate enough about this to expect it. And then we get shocked by it and we feel like our body is broken. And that's why menopause gets such a bad name. Our nutrients, it isn't we are what we eat. It's we are what we absorb. And as we get older, our nutrient depletion becomes more and more problematic, which is why as we get older, we actually need to be eating cleaner, whole, unprocessed foods and working on balancing our blood sugar. Our insulin resistance is actually becoming more problematic automatically as women age. So these things are natural occurrences. And yet the things that we've been doing up until this point have accelerated the issues when it comes to those things. So no wonder we are experiencing what we are experiencing. Now, the good news is that while, yes, I would love women in their 20s and 30s to understand what they need to be doing, it's never too late to be able to make it better and to be celebrating. And one thing, I love Dr. Stacy Sims. She wrote a book called Next Level, and she has talked a lot about all of these pieces of the puzzle, especially for women athletes in menopause. Now, if you're not an athlete, I want you to be one. Strength training is one of the most important things that we can do for women, especially as we are getting older. We can get stronger bones. We can actually reverse osteopenia, osteoporosis. We can't, but we can reverse that initial bone density issues that we have with jumping and with heavy strength training. And Dr. Stacy Sims talks a lot about that. But in her book, Next Level, I have it here right in front of me. I want to just share with you, so you know it's not just my opinion, on why intermittent fasting, which is a bougie way of just saying eat less, move more. It's a bougie way of restricting calories. Most of the research that we have on fasting is around men. And women and their hormonal balance will get so thrown off because everything relies on blood sugar regulation, stabilization, insulin sensitivity. And our fasting is impacting us not only because we're letting ourselves get really hungry in our body that has to go after muscle for nutrients, but because nutrient depletion is part of getting older, we need these nutrients absorbing in our body all day long. We are a refuel as you go machine. And so she talks about how intermittent fasting was a way to help people with obesity because it was a way for them to control their caloric intake. And that's really what we need to recognize, and how men do pretty well on some of these testings, but women it's a problem. No benefit to insulin sensitivity from calorie restriction. Women who had high blood sugar and were on the cusp of becoming diabetic saw worsening in their insulin sensitivity and blood sugar levels. Women had minimal, if any, improvement in autophagy, which we can get. A lot of people will talk about autophagy because of the benefits of that when it comes to cellular regeneration and cellular damage. But we can get that through strength training and through sauna and getting in heat. We don't need to do that through fasting, because it actually is known to cause more oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is like little lightning bolts in our body, zapping all of our cells, even our good ones. So it's actually doing the opposite of what we think fasting has the ability to do for women. Thyroid function slows down, as well as our metabolism, and your body will try to preserve energy when you're fasting. At the same time, keto is another thing, because again, we focus on the weight gain around menopause as one of the symptoms, but there's so many that could be occurring. And because we've maybe eliminated carbs before, cut our calories before, and lost weight, we keep thinking that's what we should be doing now, but we're not recognizing that that actually contributed to the issues that we're having now. So Dr. Stacy Sims writes in her book around the idea of giving up carbs without carbohydrates providing or supplying blood glucose. The keto diet forces our body to produce it in ways that's not beneficial for us, especially as we're in menopause. Because on paper, it sounds good, but our body uses carbohydrates to kickstart fat burning. So even if we're primed to use fat for fuel, and women more so than men are already primed to use more fat as fuel, you still need carbohydrates to access your fat burning metabolism. Denying your body, and I quote, denying your body carbohydrates during exercise is a huge stress. How many people are fasting before they exercise? Research shows that the keto diet has an unfavorable effect on muscle fatigue on women. It also shows markers of bone remodeling that are impaired after short-term low-carb, high-fat diet. None of this is good for menopausal women. So, and then when we try to exercise on top of all of that stress that we're putting on because we're not fueling our body correctly, that is where we get so problematic. All right. So what do we need to be doing instead? What was I doing in my late 40s for 10 years, where I didn't even know I was in menopause? I talk about that blood sugar stabilization. Okay. Your body's like foundational goal is to have its blood sugar stabilized. And you know this, right? Because let's say when you're really, really hungry, what are you going for? When you're really hungry, like, oh my gosh, I just need to open my pantry. What's the first thing you're pulling? You're pulling chips, you're pulling bread, you're pulling carbohydrates, like dense, refined carbs, right? You're not like craving a piece of lean chicken. And that's because your blood sugar is really low and your body that check engine light is on, right? And you wouldn't drive your car for too long with the engine light on, but we do that for ourselves. We try to bust through hunger, but that's our body talking to us and saying, hey, we need some help here. But if we just try to push through that hunger, or we just start to crave and we just binge eat on the carbs, both sides of the equation are wreaking havoc on our blood sugar. But that is your body's way of talking to you, and it's our job to listen to it. So I know your blood sugar is low when we're really hungry because we crave carbs, which is sugar, right? And when we're really, really full, when our blood sugar is really high, we can get really lethargic, right? Like our energy levels are really low. We can also, on our blood sugar high, we'll come down really fast. If you've ever eaten a whole bunch of like either processed foods or sugary things, you could eat a lot of it and then suddenly feel really hungry again, not that much later. That's a blood sugar roller coaster. If we fasted and then we eat, and when we're after fasting, if we've ever dieted and we were just like, I can't do it anymore, and you have a cheat meal. This is why cheat meals drive me crazy, because we're cheating and our body then like can't handle it because we've been restricting it for so long. And just think about this yo-yo for years and years and years and years. So your body is sending you signals. The problem is we look at it as failures. The weight gain, the fatigue, the hormonal imbalances, the hot flashes, skin issues, all of these things, they're signals. It's not that your body is mad at you. It's not that it's failing you. And the diet culture has had us believe that we have to fix ourselves, not understand ourselves. Your body's actually saying to you, like, I don't feel safe right now. Help me to feel safe. And so regardless of what stage in the menopausal continuum that you're on, stabilizing your blood sugar has to be the very first thing that you focus on, because your body will work to stabilize it on its own if you don't want to help it. But it is so much harder on your body. And especially as your estrogen levels, your progesterone, your testosterone levels are continuously decreasing, you are then causing your adrenals to have to work harder to be able to keep up. And all of that is causing a lot of these check engine lights. So how do we balance our blood sugar? It's why I'm so bullish on the concept of PFC3, a protein, fat, and carb every 3 hours. You eat within an hour of waking up. And yeah, you eat sometimes it's an hour of going to bed, but you're always feeling ready to eat, satisfied, never really, really hungry, not letting yourself get really, really hungry, and not letting yourself get overly full. And that portion size of a protein, fat, and carb, you want your protein to be a little bit higher than your carbs. And when I say carbs, ideally for a perimenopausal woman, the dense or the refined carbs are not necessarily what I'm talking about. It's not to say that you can't have them, but I would say food is not good or bad. It is not healthy or unhealthy. It serves your body or it serves your soul. And a good pasta meal may serve your soul, but it is likely not going to serve your body. So all I ask is that when we serve our body more than we serve our soul, so that when we're serving our soul, our body is rested, it feels balanced, it feels strong, it feels energetic, and then it can handle the times that you're serving your soul without guilt. So when I talk about carbs, ideally, if you're serving your body, you're looking at fruits and vegetables as your carbohydrate intake, maybe a dense carb for a meal or two, like sweet potato or rice. Those have lots of nutrients in it. And remember, I said, it isn't you are what you eat, you are what you absorb. So you want to be eating that clean, whole, unprocessed food, as many nutrients as possible. And you can't get more nutrients than a whole lot of variety of plants, vegetables, and fruit, along with your protein. Ideally, animal protein is the most readily available for our body to be able to use in the way that it needs, because that protein is actually going to replace the need for your body to release insulin at a high level. Because when you have carbs, your body will spike, your glucose will go up. You will what's called glycate. But when you actually eat a protein first before those carbs, your body won't need to release that insulin, and then, which causes insulin sensitivity, because you've got that protein there to help mitigate it. But also that protein with that nutrients has those amino acids that your body can't produce on its own. It's helping you. So when you strength train, you actually build more muscle instead of decreasing it, because women, we are decreasing our muscle mass every decade. And we can't afford to do that. That's what keeps us upright. That's what keeps us strong and longevity alive. And then a fat, oh my gosh, like I was born in the 70s, right? So fat, by the time I knew anything, was bad. Everything was low fat, no fat. And that was problematic because we need fat to burn fat. Fat actually helps us digest our protein and our carbs. It fuels our brain. It cushions our organs. And we need to have all of those things that we're actually meant to be eating together. So if we can actually stabilize our blood sugar in that way, the longer we do it, the better it gets. It's like a fine wine. And it's not about counting calories. It's not about depriving ourselves. In fact, it never was. The whole concept of a caloric deprivation drives me absolutely batty, because I will always say, what thrives in a deficit? Nothing. And your body is no different. It's like the weight loss industry, and 99% of nutritionists and most doctors say caloric deficit, caloric deprivation, put your body at a caloric deficit. What it actually needs is the right amount of food. Because do you realize that the calories that you're burning through exercise is only 10% of your caloric burn? And being able to really measure that is very, very complicated. And again, if it's about nutrient absorption, 350 calories of an Oreo cookie is going to be very different than 350 calories of like turkey's almond and an apple. It's like my go-to PSC like example. So we have to recognize that calories in versus calories out, all that is energy in food. We need to focus on those macronutrients, but we don't need to focus on counting them for the day. It's just each meal. A protein, a fat, and carb every 3 hours. We know we want our protein a little bit higher than our carbs, and our fat to be about half of that and about half of our protein. And we should be ready to eat satisfied, ready to eat satisfied. That's literally all the math we need to do. And it's not about food rules, but it's about food understanding how food works in our body. And if we can serve our body more than we serve our soul, and we're listening to it, it's amazing how everything gets better. And over time, it gets even better and better and better. I just did the Function Health blood work from Function Labs, and which I can put a link in here for that, because it was over 100 different markers that I had tested. And at 50 years old, my actual metabolic age is 43.6. And what's so interesting is that when I was 38 years old, I had some testing done to figure out my metabolic age, and I was 42. So at 38, I was functioning as a 42-year-old, but at 50, I'm functioning like a 43-year-old. I mean, that is a key piece of this, the foundation of understanding blood sugar stabilization. And at 38, that's when I was gaining weight, super frustrated with my body, had all the check engine light signals on, and then learned how to use food as fuel. But we also have to recognize that it's not just food. It's what I call the 6 spinning plates. Nutrition, that's your key. Movement, strength training, exercise, Hydration impacts our blood sugar dramatically. And if you sweat, you need to be replacing it with electrolytes, not just water, because we don't sweat out water. Sleep. If we are not getting regulated sleep, our body's cortisol levels and glucose levels are through the roof. Again, remember, I said it's all around insulin resistance. That's also impacting our gut health, which impacts everything else, including our hormones. But once you can start fueling your body correctly, it's amazing how when you start spinning one plate, another plate starts spinning and sleep improves. So we have exercise, nutrition, sleep, hydration, managing our stress. When I wear a continuous glucose monitor to monitor my blood sugar levels, it's amazing how I can be eating absolutely on point to serve my body, no massive dense carbs and eating, in a way that I've just talked about, getting my sleep. But when I am stressed, my glucose levels are through the roof. And there's a lot of ways to mitigate and manage stress. We'll talk more about that on the podcast too, but that's another big one. And then also supplementation. Now, when I say supplements, I do mean things like possibly HRT, definitely vitamins and minerals. When it comes to supplementation, I also talk about supplemental, like sauna. A sauna is one of the best things that we can do. There's so many studies on longevity and health around being in a sauna. I consider walking actually not exercise, but supplementation, something we all have to do when we are walking at least 7,000 to 10,000 steps, or supplementing small movements about every half an hour for a minute or two throughout the day. Our glucose levels can stay regulated throughout. So these are the things that we have to be able to think about and then start noticing all the different check engine lights, not just weight, because our body may or may not release weight as quickly as you want it to, but our body holds on to weight as a way to protect itself, often from ourselves. And so we can't use that as a measure of whether or not something is working. I promise you, blood sugar stabilization is your body's love language. These tactics will help you balance your blood sugar, and ways to monitor that progress have to be more than a number on a scale. In fact, I would argue the scale needs to go away. Throw it in a dumpster, because when the scale is gone, you can actually start to see and feel and notice things that are not scale related, which will give you the markers of improvement. So the last thing I want to talk about though is just recognizing that, like when I did the function health tests, yes, they talk about hormonal levels and hormonal balance, but when we get our hormones tested as women, it is a moment in time. It could be much lower at any moment during the day. It could be much higher at any given moment in the day. And like, for example, the hormones that I'm on is a vaginal hormone. If I use that hormone and then do a blood test a few hours later, it's going to be much higher because it's in my system right then and there. So the hormonal testing can or cannot be beneficial, because at the end of the day, we know we're depleting in those hormonal areas. We know that it's got to be so much more around the foundational piece of those 6 spinning plates, especially blood sugar stabilization. And that then, based on our symptoms, we can start to decide what supplemental actions we want to take. Testing could or could not be helpful for you, but it cannot be where our first line of action is also just saying there's a quick fix here with a medication or a hormone therapy, without actually focusing on these other pieces that are the essential foundations. Again, the sooner you can start, the better you are, but it's never too late. Your body will absolutely soak in what you're doing like a sponge and start to reverse what you're seeing, regardless of how old you are. So all of this is really, I think, important and powerful. And that's why I actually have a guide for you all about menopause, all the things that I've talked about in here. So if you want to download the guide, you can go grab it in the notes in this episode, and you can have all the menopausal resources you need to be able to truly thrive during this time and actually celebrate it.